Hey y'all, Flipper Fred here. Thanks so much for joining me today as we are going to take a look at this beautiful Spyderco knife. This is the Drunken by Spyderco. It is a clone. This was a design by a guy by the name of 𝗗𝗜𝗦𝗖𝗟𝗔𝗜𝗠𝗘𝗥, who has designed several beautiful and both custom and a few production knives out of Belarus. This knife was introduced back in 2019. It was one of the most expensive Spyderco knives ever, still remains so to this date. You can buy this knife right now on Amazon for $569.95. That is the best price that you will find out there. And if you go to Spyderco's site, they actually have it listed at $770. Ironically, it actually got quite a number of really negative reviews when it came out from a variety of different, somewhat well-known reviewers. Of course, some loved it, many did, but there was definitely some bad reviews, mostly related to the price. We'll talk a little bit about more in just a second on that. So we're going to take a look at the good, the bad, the ugly on this knife. But before we do, if you would please down below here, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. It really helps little guys like us on the YouTubes get found. I sure do appreciate that. And if you want to bail out a little bit early, I don't mind that at all. If you just hit that like or thumbs up button, help your boy Fred out here. All right, so before we get started too deep, let's take a quick peek at the box it came in. I may have mentioned I bought this from OK Knives online at their website. Let me also say, before I get too far, I'm not sponsored by anybody. OK Knives has no idea that I'm reviewing their knife or discussing it. They didn't send me any knives. They don't sponsor me in any way. I paid my money for this knife and have no affiliation with them whatsoever. However, I do find that they have better quality than most. So you can see the box definitely says made in Taiwan, which it was, and the Drunken plain edge. Inside the box, we have this, what I used to think was a sticker, and I could never get this stupid thing to peel off, but there you go. It's just a piece of paper. So that was cool. And then here's what was cool, because normally you don't get these on the knockoffs. This actually came with the real pamphlet for the Drunken knife here. Talks all about the history, 𝗗𝗜𝗦𝗖𝗟𝗔𝗜𝗠𝗥, and the collaboration that they did and some of the factors that went into this. So you don't usually get these. Nothing else came in the box other than those two things and, of course, the plastic wrap itself. So kind of true to form. I like that. That was kind of cool. All right, so again, I bought this knife for $57 off of OK Knives, and we're going to take a look, because this is pretty shocking that you can do a knife like this in titanium, real titanium, milled like that, carbon fiber, obviously real carbon fiber, and hopefully if I get the light right on this, you can see that milling extends to the carbon fiber as well. So this is why they call this the Drunken knife. In case you were wondering, it's because of this very beautiful fine milling pattern that kind of swirls across there almost in a drunken path. So that's how the knife came to get this name. Again, milled on both the carbon fiber and the titanium side. So that's a beautiful thing. Let's talk about some size comps. It's always hard, I know, to get your size bearings on videos like this. I'm going to try to put these lined up on the rear end. Of course, you recognize the PM2 from Spyderco as well as the Para 3. You can see the Drunken comes right in between the two of them. It's about an inch longer than the Para 3 and probably about a ½ inch shorter than the PM2. So maybe that gives your bearings. If you are not a Spyderco guy at this point in time, maybe you are a Benchmade guy, you will recognize the full-size Crooked River as well as the Benchmade Bug Out. Definitely closer to the Bug Out size, more so than the Crooked River, albeit again about maybe an inch, 3/4 of an inch or so longer than the Bug Out. Let me give you one more comparison, because this is the most direct comparison that most people will make. So you might recognize the Spidey Chef. This is absolutely one of my favorite all-time knives. I do have a review on this as well on the channel. Make sure you see that if you're interested in this style. But look how close these designs are. So the Spidey Chef was introduced in 2016. And then the Drunken came in 2019. Totally different designers, yet look at all the similarities. Of course, as many as there are similarities in the shape, the sheep's foot style blades, the kind of arched back end of the knife, there's also so many differences. Whereas the Spidey Chef is a very plain, minimalist, almost industrial design, which I do love and suits me fine. You then have the other end of the spectrum with all this beautiful fine milling patterns on both the front and the back. So those are pretty good size comps there. Let's take a look at the specs. I'll pull those up on the left side of the screen. You can see down the right side of the specs there, all those green check marks mean this is absolutely true to the original in many ways. And that's one of the things that's very interesting about this knife. They did an incredible job of kind of cloning the actual real knife. Full open length on this is 8 inches. The blade's about just under 3.5 inches. Closed length is a little over 4.5 inches, 4.6. The handle thickness comes in, interestingly, at just under half an inch. However, when you're holding this knife in your hand, it does not feel like a half an inch in size. It's really a strange thing. It feels lighter, it feels smaller than that, feels narrower than that. Does have the same tumble finished as the original one. We matched the real carbon fiber and titanium scales. We've already talked about that. We may come back to that in a minute. The real one has an S90V steel on it. This, of course, is definitely not S90V. I did reach out to the guys at OK Knives, and they told me on this model they are using D2 steel. I haven't obviously had that tested, but I mean, if they've gone to this amount of length to make a knife with this much accurate detail in it, I don't think they're probably lying to me about the D2. The weight on this does come in a little bit heavier, which is interesting because all the size specs are very similar. So this one is at 3.6 ounces versus 3.08. We're going to take a look at the inside of this knife in just a minute, and you'll see that there's heavy milling on the titanium side of this knife on the real one, and on this one, surprisingly as well. However, maybe just not quite enough to get it down to that 3.08. Spyderco talks about this as the RIL, which is the Reeve Integral Lock, which everybody will recognize pretty readily as the frame lock. It does have an over travel stop and a steel lock bar insert. We'll look at those all on the inside. So this is true to form. Again, the real ones come in anywhere from $570 to $770, whereas ours came in at a whopping $57. The blade edge. So this is something that is hard to convey. We'll do some cut tests here in a minute. Incredibly thin, slicey blade. It doesn't appear to be that thin when you look at the rear, but I'm going to tell you, I measured right behind the edge. You're talking about a 16 1/1000ths to 17 1/1000ths at the tip. Very slicey indeed. We're going to see that. Now, one of the other interesting things is that on the real one, all of the hardware, except for the screws were steel, but the backspacer and the clip were listed as titanium. So when I tested this one, I did take it all apart and tested these for magnetism. Neither of these will work on a magnet. So it's clearly not steel on these. I'm going to guess these might be aluminum versus titanium. That may be part of what's going on in the weight factor. Same thing with these screws as well. They're all anodized very nicely and beautifully. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. All right. Again, the main feature of this knife is really the incredible mill work that went into milling all of these fine drunken lines. You can see more clearly on the back that there are heavy chamfers around many of the corners. So this thing has been knocked down, and it's shocking to me that you can produce a knife for $57 that has this level of detail work and milling, not only on the titanium side, but again on the carbon fiber side. And even more so, I'm going to bring up some interior pics of when I had taken this apart, and I'll show you some comparisons with the inside of the real thing. What you're going to see is they have fully milled the interior of this knife as well to do a lot of lightening up on that titanium side. So not only have they gone to great lengths to mill the outside, but they've done the same thing on the inside of this knife as well. There on the inside, again, you'll also see the steel insert that goes into the lock bar, which serves as both the lockup mechanism, so you get steel to steel on the blade tang, as well as the over travel stop as well, and a ceramic detent ball. Again, I mentioned the hardware is true to the original in terms of the sizes. You've got T8 on the pivot, T6s on the body screws. The back spacer is also true to form. Can't tell if this is titanium or aluminum. I'm going to guess it's aluminum as part of the cost savings of this knife, but even that is done exceptionally well. So up here at the back, it is flush with the back of the knife. Then you can see it gradually raises up to give you this almost hidden lanyard hole, which is, I love that design. But even the detail of that is beautifully done. It almost appears to be a floating back spacer. It is not actually floating. It's wider down here underneath where it connects inside the frame. But just again, the level of detail is beautiful on this knife. It was really beautifully designed knife, just spectacular. I'm a big fan of the blade. Let's talk about the blade here. Obviously a sheep's foot blade with a nice belly. I love the fact that it's angled so that you can get your fingers underneath it to do a little slicing work. Again, this is very much like a Spidey Chef. To me, this is a perfect style of EDC. The jimping is interesting. They've got jimping on the back of the blade, but it's recessed below the handle, so it basically almost makes that jimping useless to me. There's not a lot of value when it's down below the scales. I guess maybe a little bit you can get to that, but to me that was a little bit of a miss on this otherwise beautiful knife. Again, the original one was an S90V, which 5 years ago when this was introduced was a super steel. Mine is D2. Again, I do believe that. The logos and branding on this thing are extremely true to the original. So if you put this side by side, I'll bring up a photo of the real. You can see the real branding on the front side and on the back side of the knife with the 𝗗𝗜𝗦𝗖𝗟𝗔𝗜𝗠𝗘𝗥 and his mark. They did a shockingly good job of replicating the logos. A lot of these knockoffs will have kind of messed up logos, not messed up, but just wrong placement. They don't follow the right contours. They're not placed in the right part of the blade. This one is very true to form on that. So one of the biggest differences that you'll find in this knife versus the original, and you may have noticed it from the way this is flipping, is the actual action on the inside. So this one is in fact running on ceramic bearings. That's the less expensive open face style bearings, albeit ceramic, versus the real one, which ran on the bronze phosphor washers. That gives this an incredibly smooth action here. And to be honest with you, for my money, I'd rather have these bearings. I don't know, there's a case to be made for washers versus bearings. For my use, my, around the office and home type use, I love the smoothness of the action of these bearings. They're super smooth, as you can hopefully see. The sound of this also sounds interesting. I like it. It almost has a hollow thwack when you lock that out, when it gets flipped out into place. I think that's just the combination of the titanium with the carbon fiber makes a somewhat unique sound. Very solid lockup feeling on that. So I like the sound. It is almost drop shut. You can see it's very smooth on those bearings there. The detent is pretty good as well. It's not a lot, but it's definitely enough. You very rarely will fail this. That was me trying to fail it, but if you give it any amount of effort at all, it will do great. There is no blade play right, left, up, and down when this thing is at lockup, even not touching that bar. I'll tell you, the lockup is solid on this thing. I'm going to say you can judge for yourself maybe by that. It's at least 50%, maybe 60%. I have done this before, so please don't do this with any knife unless you already know and have a glove on and have tested this out. This thing is absolutely solid lockup. You are not going to break that free. Almost no lock stick on this thing. No pivot lash, no detent lash. It's all solid there all the way around. The blade is basically dead nut center. You gotta love that on an inexpensive clone, right? The sharpening choil, those of you, and you will be sharpening this because it's D2, it's not an S90V, which has both pros and cons, obviously. They don't give you a lot of space. So, and this is true to the original as well. You can see the where the grind lines here. It comes right down to the edge of the blade. So there's really not much space in here to sharpen that thing. Hopefully that you can see with the shadows of where that line is, the plunge line comes down. So you're gonna start giving it a smile after maybe 1, 2 at most sharpenings. So that's a little bit on the rough side, but it's true to the original. So what do you want? They gave you exactly what you got on the original. Let's take a look at how sharp this thing is. it came extremely sharp out of the box. I'm going to try to just take this as slow as I can. So you can see there, yeehaw for that. It cuts paper. How about some cardboard? Let me get a slice of cardboard here. This is going to be tough to see on the video, but this thing is a cardboard monster. Let's flip it over and keep on going. This thing just eats it up, okay? Sorry about all the banging. All right, I'm going to stop slicing cardboard because now what I want to do is go back, grab my piece of paper again and show you. This is what you're not going to get with a 5CR. It is still as slicey. Sorry, that's me not holding my paper. It is still just as slicey as it was to begin with. So again, that's another reason why, and I've done this several times. I've chopped many a box with this knife already, little office warrior tasks. So, yeah, yeehaw for that. I think we've got a nice, good, sharp blade here. Well, I know it's sharp, and I think it's probably a good D2 as well. Who knows? I didn't have it tested, but these guys have been around a long time. They do have a reputation to protect, and so I'm pretty sure when they tell you this one's D2, because they've been around and this is all they do, it's not like a Chinese shop on Temu or AliExpress that comes and goes. I can trust that a little bit more. All right, let's talk about the bad. So this is the main thing that people hated about this knife, and that is the pocket clip. So let me close this thing up so we don't hurt ourselves here. Look at how far that thing sticks up. That is just like a bird beak, a snake waiting to strike. So here's problem number one. Obviously, that is a pointy tip sticking way up high. It's easy to get it into a pocket, or let's say get it started in your pocket. But let me tell you, this thing is poking out all day long. Do not go near car doors or anything with nice paint jobs that you don't want to destroy with that, because that will absolutely, it's a snag magnet. And that's what people hated about it. The second thing they hated about it is look how high it sits. It sits very low on the knife. There's almost no height to it at all. So it's very difficult to get, you know, a pair of pants under there. Let me see if I can squeeze a piece of cardboard up there. This is what happens to your pants. It gets to about this point right here, and that's it. It gets stuck. It's almost impossible, especially on a pair of jeans, to get this thing to go all the way down. So I may have to take it off. I've looked at some forums to see how people have handled this, and basically how they're handling it is they pop this off and take a pair of pliers to it and bend it a little bit higher and then rebend it down. So it is what it is, but that is, again, absolutely true to the original. Here's another somewhat negative is the ergos on this thing. For as nice as it is, and they do have, again, a lot of chamfers in it, this gap right here between these 2 points. So I have a size large glove, right? Just barely. I'm just a medium is just a hair too small, and I have relatively skinny fingers. So I can get my 3 fingers in between that gap right there. And if I do that, that's okay. If you have larger fingers at all or want to go with a deeper grip, what you're going to end up with is putting this ring finger right here on this hump. And that can get, if you're doing hard action push cuts or really just gripping down on it, that point right there can start digging into you. The other thing is, for as nice as they've done all the lines and the chamfering, there's no sharp edges, but this bottom part right here is definitely going to stab you a little bit. Again, even if your fingers fit into the right slots, just gripping hard into these relatively thin points right here on the knife, where you can see they've got the lock bar recess cut out there, that right there can start to wear on you in your fingers as well. So I'm just trying to give you the good, the bad, the ugly. Are those elements enough for me not to want to have or use this knife? No, not at all, not by a long shot. Let's talk about what I like most. We'll bring this thing home. Again, extremely beautiful design. I mean, elaborate millwork on the front and the back and the inside. You've got at least aluminum, if not titanium, clip and backspacer and pivot screws. You've got a nice thin slicey blade, a D2 steel, which holds out well. You do have the steel lock bar insert and over travel stop. You can see that again there. I mean, this is so true to the original. Unless you had somebody who just knows how to tell the difference between bearings and washers and the action based on bearings and washers, this thing is going to be really hard to tell apart from the real thing. And so, I mean, I bought a clone knowing I'm buying a clone. I do like the fact that it looks pretty close to the original, right? Isn't that why you buy a clone? Otherwise, you'd go get something that's unbranded or a different knife entirely. So for that, all those reasons, I think this is a beautiful knife. It's shocking to me, again, that for $57, you can get this elaborate of a millwork and finish on a knockoff knife. The only real difference between this and the real thing is really that blade, that S90V. So I'm almost wondering, gosh, could you go buy a replacement S90V blade? And there you go. You've just made yourself the real deal. I don't like recommending these. I do hate for all the haters, and I'm sure they have built up in the comments by now, who say, why are you even reviewing these knives? And for that amount of money, you could have gone and got a beautiful, a Civivi knife or something. I have all those knives, you guys. There's just a million reviews of those, and nobody's reviewing these knives. And this is just kind of where my interests are at the moment. I'm just kind of fascinated by these things. I didn't mention the Spidey hole. That's always another issue that people hated, was that you blocked half the hole with the lock bar. For me, that's not an issue at all. If you've been watching, I pretty much flip this all day here in that back hole. Again, your finger size may vary, and that may or may not be an issue, but that front hole is absolutely fully accessible. You can easily slow roll it into place, so that's not an issue. So again, I don't want to really recommend a knockoff knife. I hate that they're able to do this, but until, it becomes illegal or such to buy these, I'm enjoying just checking them out. I like being able to feel it and hold it and try it out in my pocket and discover that the pocket clip sucks for myself. It's been great around the home and office for tasks. So I am quite happy with my purchase here. I can't lie and say, oh no, I think this is a terrible knife. It's not a terrible knife. You can see that for yourself. So if you would please take a moment right below before you leave here, hit that subscribe and notification bell. It really helps us little guys out. Give me a thumbs up if you thought I did good. If you want, give me a thumbs down. Just let me know what you think I did wrong, and let me try to do better. I do know this video went a little bit longer, but there's so much detail in this. I just wanted to make sure I could get to it all. Thanks again so much for joining me. I do appreciate y'all, and I will see you on the next video. Bye-bye.